Hey everybody, this is Nathaniel Provencio, and I'm with the guru, man, like one of my Mount Rushmore educators, Mike freaking Mattos. What's going on in San Clemente, California?
Hey,
What's up, man?
wow. Just that intro, like I'm gonna send it to every family member that I know. Awesome. How's it going, my friend?
It's good, man. It's good to be home. It was a wonky travel week for me. I think you were just at a place. I was just in Delaware. I was in Delaware. Where were you, Mike? Where did you come from?
I worked in Phoenix Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and had a chance to work at BYU with educators on Thursday. So
BYU. That's in Utah, right?
exactly, Provo, Provo.
Man, okay, so I did a little work in Provo. That's an interesting place. Beautiful,
Oh, stunning.
stunning, right?
Yep,
Stunning. And I worked with a school where the Sundance Film Festival is, like the
yeah,
school that would have served that area.
yep,
That's
yep.
right in that area.
On a work. In fact, since this is a leadership podcast, I'll do a quick shout out. BYU has a leaders academy. It's a
Mm,
two-year program where you go through a cohort with other new administrators, and I worked with them for 16 consecutive years because it is,
wow.
I think, like the best leadership ongoing support program that I've ever seen personally. Just doing
That's
some
awesome.
phenomenal work.
And I will say, Mike, you and I had a conversation a couple of months back about the difference between In-N-Out Burger and Five Guys. I don't know if you remember this conversation.
I do. I
I,
do.
I'm a Five Guys guy.
I
However,
know. And I still like you.
I, I
I
I'm
still like you.
starting to turn though, man. I'm starting to turn.
You've seen the
Every
light?
time I go to In and Out, it is literally they never screw up the order.
Never.
The service has been impeccable. And this I got the four by because you gotta know your menu, right? It's not just
You
there.
do.
There's a hidden menu, right?
There's a hidden menu. Exactly right.
So I got this 4x4. I just said, give me the biggest, baddest hamburger that you got. And they're like, that's a 4x4. And I'm like, this is pretty good. I got to tell Mike, I'm starting to be a convert, man. So
There they go.
yeah,
I think leaders can learn a lot from in and out, right? They do only a
yes,
few things and they do them exceptionally well.
yes, yes. And I
Yeah.
just like essential standards.
Right.
Look at that.
Right.
Well, it all goes
Right.
back around, man. It all goes back
Exactly.
around.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, let's jump into some leadership stuff, man. I was actually, as my partner and I, Eric, were preparing for this conversation, we did a little intel on Pioneer Middle School,
Hmm.
and man, they continue to crush it. Fascinating, very very high performing school, Pioneer Middle School. You know about this school, Pioneer Middle School, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate. My very first administrator position, I was the assistant principal when the school opened under construction.
Wow.
Um, the principal that hired me, Adele Hoyer, phenomenal influence upon me. For principals out there, what Adele Hoyer did for me was too often you make the assistant principal the person who does all the jobs the principal doesn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, no. She put me in charge of important instructional things also, and then gave me the space to actually lead it, not micromanage me, not. But I
Mm.
always knew I had that mentor, that wiser person that when I got stuck, and I did make some missteps, but she
Yeah,
allowed me to do that, and I think that certainly helped me up to be a successful principal later because
yeah.
I got those experiences. But that particular school. So it's a 6, 7, 8 middle school, and I was assistant principal there for 2 years.
Mm.
My first principalship was at an awesome school named Marjorie Bay Elementary, and the assistant soup at that time of curriculum instruction, Dr. Stephanie Paggi. I never worked at the elementary school level,
Mm.
and so I thought my pathway would be to be just a secondary administrator. And she said, "For your first principalship, we would like you to go to Marjorie Bay." And I said, "But I'm not elementary." She goes, "You'll learn more about good instruction at the elementary
Mm.
school level." And it was true. It was true. Elementary school teachers are just phenomenal the way
Yeah,
they differentiate. And
yeah.
I learned so much. In fact, I didn't leave that school because I wanted to. The superintendent, the Adele, the principal at Pioneer, was in
Hmm.
to open a new high school.
Hmm.
The superintendent moving me back to be principal at Pioneer. I was there for 5 years.
Wow.
But that whole idea of lasting leadership, the first school, Marjorie Bay, where I was principal, that that school, not because of me, because of
Hmm.
collaborative efforts, we committed to being a true professional learning community. We we saw some record growth in student achievement. It was named a California Distinguished School, a National Title
Yeah.
One
It's
achievement,
awesome.
that's right. But a lot of what happened with the leadership there was I was good at building trust with the
Mm.
faculty, and so I think they were open to take some risks when it comes to embracing some new practices.
Yeah.
But I didn't do a good job of building an effective leadership team where we build shared knowledge about the process,
Mm.
was studying hard about the process and guiding through technical change, but I'm not
Mm.
sure if there was I built a deep understanding. The principal that replaced me was fantastic. The next principal though just didn't quite get it
Mm.
and actually started putting in practice as counterproductive. And within 4 or 5 years, that school, even though mostly the same staff, hard
Yeah.
work, the leaders dismantled things that were proven to work and that school's achievement dropped. And
Yeah.
I'll make this a little longer answer than what you probably were looking
Yeah.
for, but it's two key pieces here. So my dear mentor friend Dr. Rick DeFore, I went to Rick and I said, hey, Marjorie Vey, you're gonna have to take off the model PLC list because I know it's not that anymore.
Mm.
And uh, and Rick looked at me and said this. He said, Mike, the mark of a good leader is not what happens when you're there as much as what happens when you leave.
Yeah. True.
Because great leaders don't tell people what they do, they build the capacity of other people to lead.
Yeah.
Um, and he said, so what do you do different at Pioneer?
Mm.
Pioneer within 5 years, because of the efforts of that staff, just phenomenal growth in student uh, uh, achievement.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to transition out of the principalship.
Hmm.
Um, then especially my last year, I really started to think about that. Now, how do I know? Because I was much better about building a strong guiding coalition at Pioneer from day one, lots
Yeah.
of shared knowledge. But then my other dear friend and mentor, Dr. Bob Aker, um, I was working with him over the summer before my last year as principal at a PLC Institute, and um,
Hmm.
and Bob turns to me and goes, Mike, do you want a pearl? And that's Bob's way of saying, can I give you some advice? And I
That's
go,
interesting.
of course, Bob,
Of
please.
course. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's right. This is exactly what he said. He goes, as a leader, you're a foreign language teacher.
Mm.
I go, what? He goes, as a leader, you're a foreign language teacher. We teach thinking through the words that we use. We teach
Mm.
you thinking by how we talk about it. So I want you to think about the words that you use. And I want you to think about the consistency that you have. And are you building that vocabulary and thinking in others? And I
Yeah.
thought about it on the flight home because the event was in Boston. I live in California.
Mm. Yeah.
Long flight home
It's a long
to
flight.
think about, right? And so for the next month at school, this is what I had the discipline to get myself to do. Any staff member that asked me a question, Mike, should we do? Mike, can we do? Mike, do we have permission to?
Mm.
My answer was always the same. What do you think my answer is going to be?
Mm.
And I was very happy. This is the answer I heard vast majority of the time. You're going to ask us, is it good for kids in learning, and what research and evidence do we have that it will work? And I'm like, right. So, is it good for kids? And they go, yeah. I go, and do you have the research or evidence? Yeah. I go, then why are you asking me? Would I
Wow.
would would we ever not support it if that was the case?
Yeah.
So go.
Go. Off you go.
Go, lead, go, do. And so I left the principalship at Pioneer. This is my 14th year.
Mm,
It's had two superintendents. That school's had multiple principals.
yeah.
And and what's helped over time then is that that original leadership teacher leader core
Hmm.
has been around over those years. So
Yeah.
principals have brought in some different
Sure.
strategies, and some are strengths that have helped improve that school. But the core of what that school does and why they do it and how they know that it works,
Yeah.
they've defended that.
I
Now
think
one
that's
last point,
outstanding.
and that's for district people here.
Yep.
Boy, it sure is helpful when they have a transition plan that can maintain some of that consistency.
Hmm. Hmm.
You think about Stevenson High School, who's now been a model, the
Yeah.
model, the mothership of the whole process now for over a quarter of a century. But when Rick went to superintendency, then he'd mentored Tim Canel to move into the
Yeah.
principalship. Then Tim went to the superintendency, Eric Twaddell, who had been mentored in the process.
Yeah.
So that consistency of leadership never happened by accident.
Right.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
rambled a lot,
No, man. No,
but
well,
you asked a good question, and it wasn't one thing that did it. It was a
oh,
series of things that made it possible for that school to continue to thrive.
well they are, and I sometimes I have this kind of like leadership paradox thought and thinking, especially when it comes to professional learning community work,
Hmm.
because the reality is principals don't stay for 20 years. They're not. Teachers aren't staying for 20 years. It's not. And so I think leadership is exceedingly important to set that kind of professional learning community culture where the teams feel like they have autonomy, they have empowerment to be able to engage in that collective inquiry and action research and making sure they're doing a few things really, really well and getting evidence and believing in each other and like that type of good culture. And a good principal is going to facilitate that ecosystem, right? And here's what always this is the paradox that I have. That principal leaves, and then another principal comes in where maybe the district hasn't been aligned with that expectation and it's more personality driven than purpose driven. And then the personality of the principal comes in, and then the the teachers look at each other and say, yeah, this guy doesn't believe in PLC work, so let's go back to be close the door and kind of do our thing. And then I see that happening. And then I'm like, well, I wonder if, like you said, if the principal was doing enough to cultivate a culture that endures regardless of who's at the front of the ship. And then I've also seen, Mike, teams say, hell no, you're not changing this culture. This is work. We're a model PLC school. Maybe we did, there's no bait and switch here. If you don't want to mutiny, you're going to help support us here. I've seen both things. And that's really what you want, is where the teachers and team have so much power that the culture, effective school culture, that collective teacher efficacy culture will endure regardless of who's there. And maybe you could speak a little bit to those kinds of scenarios in your work, if that makes sense.
Wow. I think you're spot on in your observation there. I've seen both of those traits happen too. And 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 if you think about research and evidence about this, you think about, Jim Collins, his book Good to Great.
Sure.
He expected to find dynamic leaders that transform. He called it the Messiah leader,
Sure.
but they come and go,
They
right?
come and go.
So I think one key that I referenced earlier is a leader not trying to lead alone, but build the capacity of a team to lead it. So when any one leader, teacher leader, or administrator leaves, you still have this base of knowledge of best practice, what we've tried, what works, what hasn't worked, and that carries forward. I was markedly better at the second school at
Sure.
developing an empowered leadership team. But I think the other thing that I heard in what you said, it makes me reflect on my career, because I spent the biggest chunk of my career as a classroom teacher, and I was proud.
Hmm.
I love teaching. Um, and that's this. That means I got to work with a number of different principles and principal styles
Sure.
for
Yeah.
the over the years that I spent. And and I can think of a couple of principles in particular that I worked for that that they were dictators. And if it
Yeah.
wasn't their idea, it wasn't a good idea. And you know what that taught me as a teacher? Shut up,
Yeah. Sure.
because you get a target on your back
Yeah.
when you start to either individually or in a faculty meeting raise suggestions and concerns.
Yeah.
Even if teachers knew what worked and a new administrator came in, if their style of leadership was a top-down directive and almost using positional power as a bully,
Yeah.
right? Then even if you've empowered teachers to understand what best practice is and advocate and innovate, be willing to say,
Hmm.
well, let's try this because we'll never get better results until we continue to improve. If we only do what we've always done, right?
Right.
But but if you're in an environment where that will be seen as challenging or you're going to be punished or belittled or when it doesn't work, then that's when you say, I'm just going to shut my door.
Yeah. It's fight or flight, fight, flight, or freeze.
Right? Bunker mentality.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when I have worked with those leaders that empower you, and I'll go back to like my story about Adele Hoyer, first principal I was for.
Mm.
I felt empowered. I felt like she was someone who I was partnering in leadership. And I say that there was no doubt she was the principal. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes you've got to make the decision. Sometimes you will make a decision that's right for kids that might not be popular. Sometimes there's best practice and 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 your staff will not buy in until they see it work. And if we don't ever try it, it'll never work. So you'll never get commitment. So at some
Yeah.
point you gotta say, we're going. Come on.
Just do it.
But 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 hopefully you built the trust before that because you have been someone that it hasn't always been top down, my way or the highway,
Yeah.
in using positional power to lead instead of using true research, knowledge, relationship, trust,
Hmm.
those kinds of things, I think,
Hmm.
are far longer lasting. You would agree that
Um,
in your experience, right?
yeah. I have this theory that leaders lead how they were led, and teachers teach how they were taught. Um, and if you were so lucky to have a role model that empowered you in your early career, and you know, and I think that when we're around archetypes of excellence, then we want to be excellent. And I think that is where we have to understand that the best educators and the best leaders, in my opinion, are the best learners. And if we can go in as leaders, as a new AP or a new principal saying, I don't know shit. I gotta learn from people. As
Right.
long as we're learning, I think we're leading in a way. It's when we're closed minded and we think that just because we got that office and we got the coffee cup and we've got the bathroom in the office and we've got this, that we're the end all be all. You're not, brother. We're not. And we've got to be able to keep learning from people. And sometimes we're around leaders that we learn what not to do,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
that's important. Sometimes we're around leaders where we're like, yeah, I want to, do those things, but maybe not that way. But that mentality is a learning mentality. And I think I worked with principals that I didn't like at all. I didn't feel psychologically safe, like you were talking about. So I kept a low profile, kept my head down, and just done what I need. And I worked with other principals that were like, I trust you. I see you as a leader. Watch me, follow me. Let's take a leadership field trip, go to other schools, see what they're doing. That's how we serve people, man. We serve people by and kind of filling their cup up and seeing them maybe in ways that they don't see themselves. And so, Mike, when I hear that you empowered those teachers at Pioneer, you gave them a vision of themselves that maybe they didn't see. And that's what good leadership is, to me, is supposed to be, right?
I I I so agree with that. I never saw myself going into leadership. It was leaders who saw potential in me, who tapped it in me,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
uh,
Exactly. And that's what we have to do.
and then nurtured it. Exactly right. exactly.
So let's let's ride this leadership train a little bit more. Let's do a little hypothetical.
Let's
Yeah,
go.
right.
Let's go.
Let's do it. The leadership landscape, the school landscape, the teaching landscape is different now than it was when you and I were in the game. It's different. We go to schools, man. We see it. Like I was in a school, urban school, a couple months ago. Um, Out of 60 staff members, 45 were either long-term subs or probationary people. And the other staff members were just kind of like a smattering of different experiences here and there. I never had to serve in a school like that. I mean, I was fortunate. I had the best of the best that wanted to work with me. I recruited the best of the best. I put them on the best teams, and we just rolled up our sleeves and kicked butt. I didn't have a teacher shortage that I had to deal with. Mike, if you were a principal now, post COVID, right? BC, right? Um, what would you do? Like, what would you do different? What would you do the same? Um, where would you even begin if you were tapped to be that new principal?
What what educators face today that's different is just the scale of
Mm,
student need, and primarily accelerated by the impact of the pandemic. I don't think it's anything new in education to have some students enter a school year lacking essential foundational skills from years prior. A fifth grader who reads at a third or a second grade
sure.
level, right? I don't think that's something new. I don't think some kids with chronic absenteeism is something new. I don't think kids that might be going through some social emotional impact from trauma
Hmm.
is something new. What most schools haven't faced though, is when a majority of students in your school
Yeah.
are are suffering debt. We've had to have long-term subs out of nowhere
Hmm.
because a faculty member got sick, got injured, but not the scope and the scale of it.
Right.
So then let's go to your question. What's the answer? Well, this might be new to to a majority of schools. It's not new to some schools,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So if you go way back to, I think the foundation of the professional learning community process really goes back to the effective schools movement, of the late 70s.
Hmm.
So, um, and for younger listeners who might not be steeped in that research,
Yeah.
you know, basically, research came out in the late 70s that basically said this: if you tell me the zip code that a kid's born into, we will predict their achievement in school from there. Just
Right.
tell us the neighborhood, tell us the home, tell us the
Yep.
demographics, especially the economic foundation, and we'll predict how well they will do
Mm,
in school, which basically meant this: school isn't really making a difference.
mm.
It's the outside factors of the environment. And so, a group of researchers said, well, we hope that's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, university, Ron Edmonds and Larry Lazat.
Hmm.
And so they started to look for outlier schools in which a majority of the kids, if not almost all of them, were of the demographic that said they shouldn't make it to the highest levels of learning in school. And
Mm,
yet that was happening. That was happening. And they came up with correlates. What was in common in those
mm.
schools? And it was what? Well, one was they had a safe and orderly campus. And two, they had effective leadership. And three, they had high expectations for every kid, and
Yep.
so on. Right? And that shows that if we double down on the right practices, then we have the ability to overcome whatever the external things
Yeah.
impact our students. So to go back to your excellent question, what would I do today? We've got to double down on what's proven to work. Because can I be
Mm,
honest? Most schools have gotten away with not doing the right work well because you might be blessed with a bunch of kids who come from parents who are highly educated, that if we
Sure.
don't teach it well, the parent will sit down and do one-on-one peer tutoring that night and
Yep.
front load. Kids walk into school already knowing all their letters, all their colors, and you're blessed with what? A who's who faculty
That's
that
right.
that the teachers teach so well that if we collaborate at a high level or not, guess what? So many good things are happening inside
Yeah.
every classroom. And then if we only have a few kids that are struggling, well, we can collectively kind of work on that. Well, when you
Sure.
look at a school-wide at-risk school, guess what? You've got to be great at the things that work. And then the last piece of it is let's bring in now that professional learning community process. If a
Hmm.
majority of your teachers are long-term subs, alternative certified, never went through student teaching, might not even have a degree in what they're teaching, and so on, then your only hope as a leader is to build job
Yeah.
embedded staff development every week,
That's
not
right.
random stuff directly related to a teacher's current teaching assignment. What do we do in the PLC process? We form teacher teams in which they share essential curriculum, the most important things kids have to learn this year. They meet weekly and they
Yeah.
focus on those critical teaching questions of there's so much curriculum. So what's the most important stuff? What does that standard mean? What does proficient work look like? What's the scope and sequence? Let's start to teach it. Let's gather evidence of student learning. What's working and what's not. Let's learn from each other. If it's the blind leading the blind here because no one has good experience, then
Yeah.
now the admin knows where to focus, very targeted support. And and you would my last year teaching, sorry, my last year as a principal,
Mm.
I pink slipped 17 teachers and lost 14 due to budget cuts.
Wow.
Wasn't all teachers were lost reduction of size. It was the district was reducing district wide, and there was a seniority bump system.
Mm.
And teachers who had never taught, I had a teacher who taught kindergartner for 30 years, who to keep their job got bumped to teaching eighth grade ELA.
Wow.
And like they were like, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, no worries. You're about to enter a high performing ELA 8 team, and they
Yeah.
learn and work together every single week. And I knew we got this, man.
Yeah, man.
We got this.
Love it.
We have that collaborative learning culture. So, would I do something different? No. The
Mm.
urgency of how well we need to double down on the right work has never been greater. We
Yeah.
can't just skate by luckily having great parents and great teachers.
That's great, man. Um, I love it. I think that well-meaning districts are trying to do the right thing to help their schools and to help their teachers. But I'm going to share with you a couple of things I've learned on the road, my friend, that can be challenging. And I want to hear from the Mike Mattos of how you could help me a little bit when we get these questions. So I'm going to share with you a couple of questions that come up on the road, right? On
Okay.
the road, right?
I'm
First
ready.
thing is, well, I love the idea of essential standards, but the district says they're all important. And we have this district made pacing guide that we've got to follow with this word called fidelity.
Really.
And then we also purchased this $1 billion curriculum that we've got to use. And so we have to use this pacing guide. We got to use this curriculum. Mr. Provincia, we love the idea of essential standards, but it's just not realistic when we've got the curriculum cops and the pacing police looking down our throats. What are we supposed to do? We hear you, but we have some cognitive dissonance trying to figure out what we do. All right, Mike, that's one of my questions, brother. What would you say?
I would encourage any site leader or teacher who has that directive you just described from leaders above to respectfully ask. Um, we would love to know the research
Mm,
behind canned programs or program fidelity
yeah.
is the best way to increase student learning. And we would love to have the opportunity to bring to you research that would show that 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 such an approach there isn't a preponderance of research that would say that
Mm,
would be best practice.
yeah.
Now, in reality, I bet when we start to push back that way, most will say, but we spent $1 billion on
Billion
this,
dollars.
and the board said, so you're going to do it, go.
That's right.
So then I think that there is spirit of the law, letter of the law.
Hmm.
And and so just to say, well, we know the district says that. It's not best practice. To hell with that. We're taking the program and tossing it out. We have a district pacing guide. Forget it. We're not going to follow one stinking piece of it.
Good luck.
No, we are going to sit down and say this. We know we cannot collaborate on everything in the curriculum in a once a week team meeting. We know we cannot collectively intervene on every standard. And if we agree all kids don't learn same way or same speed, anything we want all kids to learn, we got to teach more than once. We
Hmm.
cannot teach all the curriculum more than once. Um, so we're going to need to have some clarity on some most important things from year to year, grade to grade, course to course. So we're going to take our state standards. There's too much in there, way too
Yep.
much in there, but let's identify what we believe are the absolutely most important things. Let's take a look at the district pacing guide and those most important things. Let's, within the spirit of that pacing guide, try to honor it.
Yeah.
Invariably, the pacing guide will not give enough time to ensure all kids match that standard, but we can build a tier 2 intervention time into our master schedule so that as we wrap up a unit around an essential, and hopefully most kids have learned that standard, we're going to move on to the next thing in the pacing guide. We built in some flexible time that for kids who haven't mastered that essential standard yet, they can continue to work on it. We can give them help with that, and yet they're not missing new instruction
Yeah.
on the next unit, the next. And let's take a look at that $1 billion instructional program. And we're not going to follow it page by page,
Yeah.
but we can look and say, what are the parts and pieces in there that we think are could be helpful pieces of the puzzle in our instruction as we begin to teach what we deem is essential. That way, we are honoring what the people with positional power are asking us to
Yep.
do. We're not going blatantly rogue. And at the exact same time, we are leaning into what best practice would be. So
Yeah.
let me take that on. So one more quick little tangent here.
Hmm.
About this PLC question one: what do you expect kids to learn? District says, well, we had a district committee, and they've already decided them, and here they are, schools,
Yeah.
right? And often that list is too long,
Hmm.
not really viable. It might not also represent all the unique needs that the population of your school has. So I often get this question. Well, should we pick essentials? The district already did it.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think what we say is this: thank you, district.
Yeah.
Now, at the site level, since Bob Marzano says you can't have a guaranteed and valuable curriculum unless the people asked to teach it have a voice in it.
Yep.
Right. So we're going to take that list, district, and what we promise is this: all kids will have exposure to
Yep.
these essentials. But we got to ask ourselves, do we have the capacity to guarantee every kid's going to learn every one of them? Because when we answer PLC question one, it's not we'll focus on those standards. It's a promise.
Yeah.
Promise to this year's kids and next year's teachers. If a kid was in our school this year, they might not walk into next year knowing everything, but they're going to know this.
Yeah.
Thank you, district. Now, when we identify essentials, we don't have to look at all the state curriculum. We're going to start with this, but we might have to make a list within the list that
Yeah.
will focus our collaborative efforts first. As we get better at the process, we can bring in more. But that's still honoring the district efforts because the
Yep.
district does have a role to play in answering PLC question one. But what they produce might not be the perfect product for every school. So
Yeah.
they'll have to have some ownership of it.
I love it. I think that the practice of creating a limited subset of essential standards creates a covenant of excellence
Great
for
word.
your students, right? And that's what we have to be committed to.
Agreed.
And I tell people this all the time, man. The curriculum's the tool. It's not the rule. My father is a carpenter. He's got a lot of tools, right? But the tools don't replace his excellence as a carpenter. That's just how it is. Now I do get it. If I'm a long-term sub, if I'm a brand new teacher, Yes, I know that I've got a cognitive load. And if I just use the curriculum that's been vetted or whatever, I get it that that's a starting place because I don't have the all
Yep.
the experience. And I get it. We don't want to TPT the hell out of kids and, where we're just going to the wild, wild west and doing whatever. But it's the collective conversation. It's
Yes.
the collective conversation. And so I'm glad that you were able to articulate that because that's one of the things that comes up a lot in this recent kind of like environment and ecosystem that we have. Here's the second thing, Mike. Here's the second thing that I hear. You know, we understand this whole RTI thing, but like when it comes to tier one, the tier one is the curriculum. And I taught it, and if they don't learn it, it's kind of on them. Because I've got this enormity of things I've got to teach. Our tier one is just exposure. And why should I have to differentiate with my tier one instruction? That's something separate in tier two instruction. Of course, I'm banging my head, trying to communicate this. So, how do you articulate the importance that differentiation does not lie in some other room or some other place? Differentiation lies in good tier one instruction. Can you help me out with that a little bit, Mike?
Of all the things that we've learned, there are four things that if a school would do would have the greatest impact. They're not number one, two, three, and four on his impact list. He says
Mm-hmm.
the school did these four things. This is what the research says would impact students learn the most. One, teachers would work in collaborative teams.
Mm-hmm.
Two, they would get really clear on what he calls essential learnings, essential standards. What are
Yep.
the absolute most important things that kids must learn? Three, they get really clear on how kids will demonstrate proficiency on those things. That's where the title of his book, Visible Learning, comes from. If you can't
Yep.
see kids do what you taught them, then they didn't learn it. You taught it,
Mm.
they didn't learn it. So, what would it look like if kids are learning the things that we deem essential? Then he says we would gather evidence commonly, common assessment.
Yep.
A, identify kids who might need extra help, but more importantly, to reflect on the impact of our practice, right? So here's the point of this. John Hay starts with you got to work in teams, not for the sake of working in teams, because Bob Marzano says you can't have a guaranteed and valuable curriculum unless it's created collectively. What's Hattie's
Mm-hmm.
second thing? Agree upon essential learnings. We can't do common assessments unless it's a common assessment around a shared essential standard.
Yep.
The real power is on reflection of practice, actual evidence of student learning.
Yeah.
And so I say all that. I know I was a very good classroom teacher. I know it. I mean, I had the evidence of it. I'm proud. No, I didn't start that way. I
Yeah.
worked at my craft. And and so if you ask me, Mike, did you differentiate well in your classroom? No.
Mm.
Would it have made me a better teacher? Yes. Was I like one of the most phenomenal direct instruction teachers you ever seen, though? Yeah, I was trained in Madeline 100 times, baby, and I'm a hell of a storyteller. And I mean, I now speak to 2,000 adults at once. Why?
Yeah.
I am really good at commanding a room. I am.
Yeah.
I am.
Yep.
That's my skill set. I'm not the guide on the side near as well, but on the stage, I have mastered that one. So. So, do I think it's a requirement that to have an
Mm.
effective tier one, you must have teachers differentiate well? No, they got to teach well and commit to best practice. What's best practice? Tier one's not what you do in your room, it's what we do. And
Mm-hmm.
the collaboration has to start at tier one, and that clarity of essentials, and most importantly, gathering evidence frequently in the unit,
Yep.
common formative, not common end of unit alone, common formative. So teachers, because if I am consistently teaching with my partner Nate, and Nate is consistently getting better results on our assessments, and I lean in why, and he goes, "Well, I differentiate, Mike." And I look at you like deers in headlights. What do you mean by that, Nate? And you go, "Well, let me show you a few things."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would start to bring that into my classroom
Yeah.
because the student learning is telling me I could get better results if I would shut up a little bit
Sure.
stage on the stage and start to rethink about
Yeah.
how I work with students and how they work with each other.
Yeah. I think that um to a culture of professional learning communities, they it's almost like, and I love Patrick Lencioni's five dysfunctions of a team, because like I gotta trust Mike Mattos to work with Mike. If I don't know you, I don't feel safe with you. Like you're this great speaker or whatever. You know, I'm this guy on the side kind of thing. Like we got to come together to be able to figure this out. But once we build our kind of like collective trust, we will start sharing those ideas. And here's what I love: when you see a team, you know, and this term maybe is used maybe too much, but we'll just say it. Let's say unpack a standard together.
Right.
And they're looking at the nuances of those damn verbs. And
Yeah.
it says, you know, we got to ask and answer questions in order to determine the main idea or whatever. And then, Mike, you know, you never have kids ask questions. You just
Never.
have the kids answering questions.
Never.
But,
Never.
but,
Oh, I did. Yeah.
but check it out. I mean, but that's 50% of the standard, is that the kids
Yes.
are going to have to learn how to ask questions. And then we say, well, let's go. And then that's the first critical question. Like we got to be the world's best at this essential standard. And then we ask, well, how are we going to assess it? How are we going to know our kids are learning it?
Right.
And this goes to my third point, because you brought up common formative assessments. Well, we've got the publisher made assessment, or we've got the Google form assessment, or we've got the assessments that we've made 5 years ago, or the curriculum made assessment. And then they look at the assessment and they're like, wait a minute, the kids aren't asking questions. They're just answering questions.
Right.
But we don't feel like we've got the time to create our own common formative assessment. And so that piece of evidence, to me, is always the bridge between a team's intent and their impact, is the common formative assessment. And I see this all the time. The CFAs do not match the demands of the standard. The teams aren't collaboratively creating it. It just becomes a grade. And we were just talking to Thomas Gusky on a couple episodes, just about just the sheer ridiculousness of grades. So anyway, that's my third point. Mike Mattos, where does common formative assessments play a role in this great work? Should we create them, or should we vet them, or should we just use whatever's already made and do something different? So shed a little bit of light on that, brother.
Number one, one of the best learning processes of a team in understanding a standard is needing to write an assessment about it. Rick DeFore used to say this: the people doing the work are doing the learning. If you take teachers out of the work, you take them out of the learning. So if you hand them the assessments made by somebody else, be it a textbook company or a district committee, the people who created that assessment learned a lot. People who were given the assessment. And then what ends up happening too is this: if teachers did not have the opportunity to vet and create that assessment, on high did it, when the results come back, I've watched this happen with district benchmark tests.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the conversation goes. That's a bad question.
Crappy
That was a
question.
bad distractor. They don't reflect on practice because they think it was a bad assessment. And it might have been, by the way. It might have been. That's what Doug Reeves says. The gold standard of assessment are teacher team created common assessments. Why?
Yeah.
They A, are best aligned to what you actually taught. And B, the learning process of teachers creating the assessment, they build a deeper understanding of the standard, what proficiency looks like it. And if you write that assessment before you teach the unit, now they teach the unit better because they're clear on the outcomes. Now, does that mean when a team is writing a common assessment, they couldn't lean into resources and say, we like this question from textbook book, let's use it? Great. Now they're vetting. Doesn't mean they have to start with a blank computer screen every time, but that process of them creating critical. Last point then, and that's that question. When a team says this, we don't have the time, then this is the answer. Then cut down your essentials.
Yeah.
It's better to do one thing well than 15 things poorly. Because you got to remember, your essentials are not all you're going to teach. It's what your team is collectively focusing on right now for their study. And as you said, their covenant to their
Covenant
of what all kids are going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do one thing well to start. As we get better at the process, then we'll get quicker at doing this kind of stuff. But you don't get to skip the work. We're not looking for shortcuts. Because think of the name, professional learning community. Who's doing the learning?
That's right.
the professionals.
That's
So
right.
we can't take the teachers out of the work. That's the learning.
Yeah. I love that, man. Yeah, absolutely. Those CFAs, I feel, once again, are the bridge between intent and impact. And that little piece of evidence can do more to build collective teacher efficacy than anything else. And I would rather a team make a crappy, imperfect 5-question common formative assessment and
Learn from it.
learn from it than use a perfectly created Houghton Mifflin Pearson made test and just say, well, this is what the kids did. Let's move on. And once again, that's a leadership thing too. Leaders have got to give their teachers and their teams the autonomy and the power and the permission to practice that process. And you're right. Well, we don't have time. Fine. 5 standards. Can you do 5 standards a year? Can we get really, really good with those world's best with these 5 standards? Can we have time for that? And I think that
I when we first started, I remember sitting with the first grade team. I'm like, just tell me one thing all kids must learn. They're
yeah.
spinning their wheels. Everything's essential. We don't know where to start. Just tell me one thing. One. Tell me one thing you agree all kids must learn. Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Let's
That
go.
that one thing we can answer all 4 critical questions of the PLC process
Yeah.
about, and we can get smarter and more kids are going to learn. Let's go.
Yeah. Last question in regarding these big kind of like RTI kind of PLC based questions that I want to make sure Mattos has a spin on is the 4th critical question.
Yeah.
And I, as a practitioner, I hate the fact that it's 4th because I always feel like we never get to it. So it's got to, like, extension and enrichment. There are kids, Mike, that are just brilliant, that are just laying low, being compliant, not feeling psychologically safe to speak out or have any choice or voice or any kind of collaboration with their work. And that's one of the, I don't know if this is a trigger or a button for me, but when I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm working with teams, that extension and enrichment has got to be a priority for these kids. And what I found is that when teams set the time to actually plan for extension and enrichment, both prior to the instruction and after, the quality of the instruction raises for everybody. Because if some kids could learn at higher levels and have more experiences, more extension enrichment, then all kids could benefit from that. But I hear this all the time. We have so many lost lambs. Those students are just there and they're going to do the best that they can. But I'm like, listen, if you can focus on them, you're focusing on everybody. So let's talk about that 4th critical question, man. It's because I just think it gets lost sometimes, man.
It does. And I would understand why from just one point of view, and that's, I mean, when I was a teacher and a principal, my worry always first was about the kids who weren't making it.
Yeah.
Because if we don't get them there, they have a lost future.
Mm.
Now, but I also, as you look at the research, though, um, the most at-risk kids for attempting suicide in are gifted girls, and the most at-risk group of committing of not attempting suicide in high school are gifted boys. So
Wow.
so this is something where it's not just, well, it would be nice if we could extend them.
Wow.
It is important. It is. Now, that said, I want to answer your question 2 ways. Number one, my first year teaching, the principal came to me and said, "Mike, next year I want you to teach some gate classes, gifted and
Mm.
talented
Hmm.
education. So I want you to get a supplemental credential in that." So for the year, worked on that. And what I learned in the coursework was this. For gifted and talented students, what they really need is more voice and choice.
Yep.
Lead their own learning, go deeper into Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's at that time, not revised Bloom's, not Webb's Death of Knowledge. It
That's
was
right.
the original Bloom's, right? Have them apply what they're learning in new and unique ways. And I say it to you, that's the level of rigor all kids need today.
Yeah.
That I think we only withheld that for the students that we deemed gifted and talented.
Yeah.
And then if we could, we pull them into their own class.
Hmm.
So that teacher didn't have to differentiate. Well, I would contend every kid needs to learn how to think and analytically, and needs to learn how to
Yes.
lead their own learning and such. So, so that leads to point two, and you actually have said all the answers that I'm going to say.
Sure. Yeah.
You get this so well. The best time to plan extension is when you're planning a unit with a new essential.
Yeah. Mike, if they just listen to us, man, all these problems would be solved. What's going on?
Well, I, I want to end with your excellent questions that prompt a few things for me to reflect on and think about. And you talked
Mm,
about effective leadership and 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 in the end, I think what drives educators, teacher leaders, administration to make right choices, boards of education, superintendent, it comes down to that first critical question in the PLC process.
mm.
Focus on learning and the idea that every decision that we make should be based upon, is this good for kids in learning? Are more kids going to learn because of what we are about to do?
That's right.
What research and evidence do we have that what we're doing? It's the lens that you look at every practice, every policy, every procedure in
Hmm.
our entire system. Is this is this ensuring more kids learn at higher levels? Are kids learning more and more because of this practice? Or is this practice good but not great? We're wasting resources then. We could do better. Or even worse, counterproductive,
Counterproductive.
right? And 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 in a true professional learning community, we don't make decisions by positional power.
Yeah.
Anyone in our entire system who has research and evidence of a better way to do things to serve kids, be it the long-term sub, the plant
Hmm.
foreman, the principal, or the president of the board,
Yeah.
if we have the right to come forward and respectfully say, this current practice, the evidence that we see is not increasing learning for these students.
Yeah.
And we need to seek out, or a better way to do it could be.
Yeah.
We build that culture both collectively, but then as 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 a leader,
Yeah.
every decision that we make, we have to come back to ourselves and say, what I'm about to advocate for, what I'm about to do, how do I know that this is going to increase student and adult learning and move us closer to our shared mission of high levels of learning for all? If we can always keep learning, our center point, our litmus test
Yeah.
of every decision we make, because sometimes it's easier to, well, I don't want to ruffle feathers. I
Yeah.
don't I want the staff to like me. I don't want to get so and so mad at me.
Hmm.
Don't want to. Well, the district said, let's just do it. It just says all that is other priorities.
Yep.
It always comes back to learning, learning, learning,
Yep.
learning. I think that's what certainly helped me become an effective classroom teacher, is that constant reflection of, I never had a mindset, my job to teach, a kid's job to learn.
Yeah.
I'm not doing a lot of direct instruction, but I really, but it was always, do I see students learning? Do I
Yeah.
see students learning? As a principal, do I see students and adults learning? And
I
how do I?
love it, man. We overcomplicate things way too much.
Yeah.
You know, at the end, man, I got two more questions for you before I let you go. Number one, you're one of my Mount Rushmore educators, bro. Just want you to know that. But who's on your
Honored.
Mount Rushmore? Who's on your Mount Rushmore of educators?
Rick DePore and Bob Baker, definitely. I've been so blessed that they invested in me personally, but I read their research long before, or their Bob Marzano,
Mm,
without question. I think in our generation in education, I think the educators that have influenced practice the most would be those. I'm a gigantic fan of Benjamin Bloom.
sure.
He nearly gets the credit today of the lasting impact of I think the whole concept of kids can learn if they get time and support. Well,
Yeah.
that's where RTI and MTS flows from. We can get any child there if what? They
I
get
love
time
it.
and proper instruction. That's the formula. Teach it well and give them enough time. We could
I
get
love it.
there. So Benjamin Bloom would certainly be on that list. Yeah, well, I just rattled four there instead of
I think
necessarily
that's it. There's a
four
four.
spots on Mount Rushmore. You got to stop there. But those would be the ones that have had the greatest impact upon me personally.
Well, I appreciate everything you do, your advocacy, your heart, your passion for ensuring every student is, regardless of their zip code, can be part of a fantastic school is inspiring. It's inspiring. And I really thank you, Mike. I hope you're able to play a little pickleball today, brother. Hope a little pickleball.
Maybe tonight, if not, certainly tomorrow.
All right, man. Hey, man. Enjoy San Clemente, brother. I'll be seeing you soon, man.
And next time you're near, call me and we'll go out to In-N-Out and grab a double double together. Okay.
Do it animal style, brother.